Today we will be determining how many solutions or how many x-intercepts a quadratic has. So what we're going to do that is we're going to use this thing called the discriminant. So what the discriminant does is it discriminates between the number of solutions. The discriminant is just the number underneath the radical sign in the quadratic formula. So remember, the formula goes negative b plus or minus the square root of that b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to look at just this number underneath the radical sign. And if it is greater than 0, that means that we have a positive number. And if it's positive, that means we can take the square root and we'd have two answers because of the plus or minus sign right there. Well, if it's equal to 0, that means we only have one solution. That means that this cancels out and just makes 0. And then that's just the negative b over 2a. And if this is negative, if it's less than 0, so the number underneath the radical sign is negative, that means we have no solutions, 0 real solutions, because you can't have a number underneath the radical sign. So again, the solutions are where it crosses the x-axis. So if there's our x-axis right here, the solutions are these points where it crosses. So there it's crossing 2 times. Here, it would just touch the x-axis and come back up. So there it just touches the x-axis in one space. Or in this example, it just never does touch the x-axis. That's no solution. That's when you have the negative number underneath the radical. So the important thing to do is always make sure these equations are set equal to 0. And they are. Once they're set equal to 0, we can figure out our a, our b, and our c terms. And we're going to use all of those terms in our discriminant. So it's just b squared minus 4a. So it's 10 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 6. So you do some work there. That's 100 minus, and you're going to multiply these numbers. So it's 12 times 6 makes 72. You do that subtraction, and we're left with 28. So 28, yes, that is positive. So that means that there are 2 solutions. 2 solutions. When it's positive, that means it's 2 solutions. That means it crosses the x-axis in 2 spots. Well, we do the same thing here again. Make sure it's set equal to 0. If it's not, then you have to do some extra work. So we just substitute the numbers in there. 1 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4. C is 6. Do some work there. We're left with 1 minus, and then we multiply these numbers. So we end up with a 16 times by 6, and that gives us 96. So when we do the subtraction, you can see how you're getting a negative number. Because of this negative sign right here, because of this right there, that means we have no solutions. No solutions. So 0 real solutions is another way to saying it. It doesn't mean 0 is an answer. It means there are 0 real solutions. It doesn't cross the x-axis. Well, again, we just look at our a, b, and c terms and substitute those numbers in. 10 squared. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's negative 10 squared or positive 10 squared. It's still going to give us 100. Minus 4 times a, which is 25, times c, which is 1. Do some work there. We got 100 minus 100 equals 0. When it equals 0, that means we have one real solution. One solution. That means it's going to end up crossing the axis just one spot. And again, just look at the other numbers. Look at the values. Make sure it's set equal to 0. So we have negative 2 squared. And minus 4 times a, which is 2, c is 3. You do some work there. We got 4 minus. This makes a 6 times 4 makes 24. So negative 24. And we got our problem right there. Whenever you see that negative sign underneath the radical, it means we have no solutions. So 0 real solutions. Well, let's take a look at this one. We have to do some work. We have to move this 5 back to the other side. So now we've got 3x squared minus 4x plus 5. So when we do that, we just take the a term, the b term, and the c term and substitute it into our discriminant. So we got negative 4 squared minus 4 times 3, which is our a term. C is 5. Do some work there. We got 16 minus, and then you multiply this, we end up with 60. So that's going to make a negative number. So in this case, we end up with 44, and that is negative, is what we get there. And so that tells us right away we have no solutions, so 0 real solutions is another way of putting it. Well, over here, same thing. We need to move that 2 over first, so we end up having to add it to both sides. And so now we've got a 10x squared plus 9x plus 2 all equals 0. And we just substitute our values of a, b, and c into our formula. And so we're left with b squared, so 9 squared minus 4 times a, which is 10, c is 2. Do some work there. 81 minus, because there's only one negative sign, and that makes 80, and that makes just 1 left over. So even though it's 1, it's still positive. That means there are 2 solutions, 2 real solutions. Well, the other set of directions says find the x-intercepts. It means exactly the same thing. So the difference is, instead of having it equal 0, it says it equals y. So you're just going to substitute 0 in for y. And then from there, figure out your a, b, and c values. And then just substitute. So we got 30 squared, negative 30 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 9, c is 25. So we do some work there. This makes 900 minus, and here we have 100 times 9 makes another 900. So this is a perfect square trinomial. That means it will only have one x-intercept. One intercept, because this equals 0. So one real solution. One x-intercept. So again, you're just setting y equal to 0, figuring out your a, your b, and your c terms. So when we do that, we've got a negative 1 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, c is 5. Do some work there. We got 1 minus, and this makes a 60, and that makes negative 59. And so whenever we have a negative number, it means we have no solutions, or no x-intercepts. Another way to state that answer there. Or 0 x-intercepts. So again, all you're doing is set equal to 0 already. We're putting a 0 in place of that y and just figuring out our a, b, and c values. So here we have 1 squared minus 4 times by 2 times by negative 21. So this time we have a c value of negative. And watch what happens to those minus signs here. See those negative signs? There are 2 of them. That means they cancel out. And so we just have to do 8 times 21. And that gives us 168. Which means we end up having to add those 2 numbers, not subtract. And so we do get a positive, means there's 2 x-intercepts. Well, take a look at the next one here. Again, you're setting y equal to 0, figuring out your a, b, and c values. So we've got negative 24 quantity squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 9, times c, which is negative 16. You do some work there. 24 squared gives us 576. And this is going to be a minus sign because count the negatives. 1, 2, 3 negatives. And so then we just do 36 times by 16. And that gives us 576. Exactly the same number. So it's a negative. That means we subtract. We get 0. That means we have 1 x-intercept. So there it is. So again, the discriminant works really fast to determine how many x-intercepts we have, just using that number underneath the radical sign, the b squared minus 4ac. Noting that if it's positive, there's 2 solutions. Equal to 0, there's 1, and if it's less than 0, it means you don't have any solutions. Good luck on tonight's homework.